Welcome to the 2021 Major Donor Symposium. In this breakout session entitled A Time-Tested Approach to Major Donor Cultivation, two of our consultants, Zach Gurick and Askala Harris, will guide you through a more strategic and relational approach to raising the funds that are critical to fulfilling your mission. As you listen to the content, feel free to engage with the Q&A feature where our team members will be standing by to address your questions. Q&A will be available during the session today and for 15 minutes afterwards. For additional resources, including a copy of the slides from this presentation, please return to the breakout session event page after the session to download these resources. This breakout session and the others offered today will be available on demand beginning tomorrow. As we get started, let's kick off our time together by letting everyone know where you are joining from and the organization you are connected with. Just add that information into the chat box now. Enjoy the time with Zach and Askala.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm really excited to share this seminar and breakout session and workshop with you guys. This is one of my favorite things to teach about. So I should start off and say that my name is Zach. Last name is Gurick. I'm one of the senior consultants here with the focus group. And I love the work that we get to do. I love so many of our clients. It's such a gift and a privilege and an honor to serve so many wonderful organizations that are doing great work in the world. So thanks for taking a little bit of time to spend with us today. I live in Naples, Florida with my wife, Blair, and our three kids who are 13, 10, and 6. So that keeps us busy and active, and been working with the focus group for the last 5 years or so. And previous to that, had a lot of fundraising experience through my work with an organization called Young Life. So it's an honor to be here with you all today. And I will pass it to my friend Askala, who is joining us as well. And she's amazing. So I'm excited that you'll get to hear from her today as well.
Thank you so much, Zach, and I second your feelings that this is one of my favorite things to teach about. I am in Texas. I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. I am getting married next year, and I'm also a dog mom. So as we continue this journey with you today, we just want to make sure that we give you really great tools to be able to build lifelong relationships with your donors, and we will dive into it right now. One of the things that is a really successful philosophy for fundraising is to make sure that we're treating our donors in a relational way and not a transactional way. Zach and I both have a lot of experience as frontline fundraisers, and we know the pressure that we can face sometimes when we're up against a deadline or the organization has a really big need. But if we remember to treat our donors as our partners, then we can build lifelong relationships where the donor is helping to further your mission and your ministry. So 2 imperative rules for fundraising that we just have to say right away is the first one is always let your donor know that you'll be asking ahead of time when you want to ask for a gift. And the second thing is when we're asking for a gift, we want to make sure that we're asking for something that they can say yes to. So we'll dive more into these 2 concepts as we go along, but these are 2 very important rules to remember.
Yeah, and on that note, Askala, we always want to tell our friends, our donors ahead of time that we're going to be asking. You can also tell them if you're not asking. So either put money on the table or take money off the table. But if you think about this concept that we want to have these lifelong partnerships with our donors, our partners in our organizations, then we always want to do everything we can to honor that relationship. And so if you tell them ahead of time that you're going to be asking for a gift, it takes that sort of tension out of the context of that meeting. So it's really, really important to do that. And also, if you take money off the table, then the donors, when you're in the meeting, they just have a chance to relax, and you can say something along the lines of, hey, I don't want to ask you for a gift today. I just want to share a little bit about our vision or tell you what we've done with your gift since the last time we met. And then, this other rule, ask for something they can say yes to. There's this sort of common myth out there that we would say that, a lot of people say like, oh, it's good to just ask for a really big gift. And that way you're kind of asking for a stretch, and, you don't want to leave money on the table. We hear that a lot. And what we would suggest is, hey, you're having these lifelong partnerships, and so you're not leaving the table. And so you're not going to leave money on the table because you're staying at the table. You're going to go back to that partner again, the following year and ask for another gift. And so because you have these lifelong partnerships, ideally it's not transactional, but relational. You're not going to leave money on the table. So that's why it's important to always ask for something they can say yes to as well. So we're going to talk about the 4 stages of the asking process today for successful donor cultivation. And so really, we're going to talk about basically 16 things you need to remember. But really, it's 4 steps, 4 stages. Each of those stages has 4 steps to it. So there's 16 things, 4 stages. Within each stage, you do each of the steps. And so these stages of the asking process are kind of cyclical, like you can see on the slide here. And this is one of my favorite things to teach, because when I was in direct frontline fundraising myself, I wish that someone had taught me these 4 stages and how easy it actually can be to invite someone to make a gift to the organization. I always got kind of scared about that and or nervous about it, but I really, really wish that I would have had this information. So it's so helpful and so practical, and I'm happy to be sharing this today with Askala as well. But so here's the 4 stages. You start off with the informal or casual conversation, and then you move to a tour, or the come and see, sort of a, hey, come check out and learn more about what we're doing. And then you can move into the next stage, which is presenting your case for support. And then finally the ask after that. So thinking about lifelong partnerships, you're not just going to jump in the first time you meet them and ask them for a gift, right? That wouldn't really set you up well to have a great relationship with these people. So you start off with just a casual conversation. I can tell you a story about when I was in major donor fundraising personally, directly. I had a donor who was the former CEO of Walmart. And so he had a pretty good salary, made some decent bonuses each year, being that was the largest company in the world at the time. And I met him through another major donor that lived down the street from him. And so I met him at this sort of men's fellowship gathering and just got to know him there. And we talked for a few minutes. He had a common connection and interest in the organization that we were a part of. And so after that, we invited him, hey, why don't you come and check out what we're doing? And we had this event, a couple months later. And so he was invited and he came to that. And so that was a chance for him to kind of come and see. He brought his wife, which was great. And then we actually, got a chance to play golf together after that. And so another donor said, hey, why don't I set up a golf outing? You can invite some people. And so I invited him, and we got to spend time together and kind of cultivate and build that relationship. And then later on, I got to sit down with him and share our case for support and really show him what we were doing and what kind of difference a gift would make. And then we were able to ask him for a gift, and he's been a donor to that organization ever since at a significant level. And so you can see that process took probably 6 months of time, but now he's a major partner to that organization and has been for many years. And so if I would have just met him that day and asked him for a gift right away, he probably would have made given a small gift, and we never would have talked again. But now I have a good friend and a major donor to that organization that is a lifelong partner. So those are the 4 stages. I should say too, the tour or the come and see, that can look like a lot of different things depending on what your organization does. And so that can be a tour. I like to say it's a tour of the impact of the work that you're doing in the world. And so that could be meeting an alumni, it could be meeting the president or CEO of the organization. It could be, hey, come and visit our campus and walk through and see what's happening. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. And you really want to listen in each of these stages for what your donors' interests are. And so most of this entails just being a great listener. So we'll dive into these more. So there's 4 stages. Within each of these stages, there are 4 steps.
And if I could just jump in really quickly, Zach, till we move on to you telling us a little bit more about the follow-up. For those of us that have ever been anxious out there to ask for a gift, what these 4 stages do for us is allow us to build confidence as we're working with our donors. So when you ask the donor to meet you for a casual conversation over Zoom or over coffee, the donor says yes. And then when you ask the donor to come for a tour or to come and see the impact of your organization, the donor says yes. When you're asking the donor if you can present the case to them and share with them your vision and what your organization plans to do in the future, the donor is able to say yes. So it helps to build confidence in the yes as you're working with the donors during these 4 different stages of the cultivation process.
So one of the most important steps in fundraising is always about follow-up, follow-up, follow-up. We're going to say this a bunch of times today because the biggest failure in fundraising is a lack of follow-up. So in all of these stages, follow-up is the most important thing. It takes a lot of hard work and following up to continue moving through each of these stages. And once again, those stages are a cycle. And so even after you've made an ask and the donor's made a commitment or made a gift to your organization, the next step then is to follow up and to let them know what you've done with their gift, how it's made an impact. And then, that cycle continues because the next time you meet with them, you're going to be having another casual conversation. And each of these stages has follow-up involved. And also each of these stages has an ask involved. And the ask is always for the next step. It's a question that leads to deeper engagement with you and with the organization. So, biggest failure in fundraising is lack of follow-up.
And as Zach alluded to earlier, for each stage of the cultivation process, there are 4 steps. So those 4 steps are the invitation, preparation, the meeting, and then again, follow-up. So we can jump right in with the first one, which is the invitation. So the goal of this part of the cultivation process is to get the appointment with the donor. So you want to use their preferred method of communication, even if that's email or text. You want to clarify what the meeting is about and the time needed. So again, as Zach said before, if this is a meeting that's not about money, we certainly want to make sure that's clear to the donor. And then we also want to invite the spouse to join us because as being a frontline fundraiser, as we mentioned before, sometimes you have a meeting with a donor that goes really well, but the end of the meeting says, well, I'm going to have to talk about this with my spouse. So if you can walk them together through this cultivation process, it really helps you, again, build a relationship with the couple and the family and not just one person with your organization. And Zach is going to talk about some common responses we get to asking for the invitation.
Yeah, a lot of times when you're working to get a meeting, which is hard work, it takes a lot of follow-up once again, we hear these common responses from donors. Now's not a good time, or they start just asking questions, maybe on the phone if you're talking on the phone or via email. They might ask you, hey, is this about money? They offer maybe, hey, let me just send in a check. You don't need to meet with me. Or they just keep putting off the meeting, or you're having a hard time getting in touch. Or they just say, oh, it'd kind of be a waste of your time. I don't want to waste your time. I'm not that important. These are things that I'm sure you've heard many times and we hear over and over again when trying to get responses from donors to have meetings. And remember, for us as fundraisers, meeting with these major donors might be number 2 or 3 on our priority list for that week or that month or that day. But for these donors who are really busy people with all kinds of things happening in their lives, sitting down to talk with you and maybe make a gift to your organization might be, close to number 28 or 29 on their priority list. And so it's not that they don't love you and love the work of your organization. It's just that they're busy people and there's things happening in their lives and it's not their top priority. And so we always want to keep the ball in our court. And some answers to these responses could be things, just keep in mind that your goal is to get the meeting. And so respond in such a way that says, hey, now's not a good time. Oh, well, when would be a good time? Could I follow up with your, do you have an assistant that helps do scheduling? Kind of take money off the table is another good way to help confirm a meeting. Let them know that, hey, I'm not going to be asking about money in this or about a gift in this meeting. And maybe work through a gatekeeper if they have one. So there's a lot of ways you can kind of push back on that and say, oh, these are great. If they're asking questions, you could say, these are great questions. That's exactly why I'd love to meet with you and answer these questions. And your feedback is really important to us. There's a lot of ways you can kind of respond to these common responses that we hear. So step 2, after you've made the invitation, now you have the meeting, the next thing that you want to do is prepare for the meeting. Preparation is obviously very, very important, and we want to be super well prepared as we go into these meetings and with these major donors. They're giving us their time, which is their most valuable asset. So we want to prepare really well and make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row as we head into these meetings. So there's really an art form and a science behind the preparation. The first is the art, and that is asking these questions. Who has the best relationship with this person? And so thinking through that primary caller, or who would it make the most sense to either invite this person or come along on the meeting so that they're comfortable. And ideally, that's someone that is a part of your organization that can be an advocate with you. So who has the best relationship with them? What are they passionate about within your organization? And so that is really thinking through, it's really listening, like I mentioned before. In each of these stages, you're listening for the donor's passion. Oftentimes our passions come from one of two places in our lives. It's either our greatest joy or a great joy that we experience that we want to perpetuate in the lives of others, or it comes from pain, a deep pain that we want to alleviate in the lives of others. And so we want to always be listening. I always say the best fundraisers are great listeners, because in each of these stages, imagine in that casual conversation, you're asking questions, or when you're on the tour stage and they're walking around your campus with you, or visiting with your CEO or president alongside of you, you're listening for clues about what is this donor passionate about. How does their passion and our mission intersect? Where is that intersection point? And so you're listening for those clues that are going to be really, really helpful. And then you're preparing, in your meeting. Well, okay, if we're presenting the case, for example, we're going to drill down on these areas that I know align with their passions, and we're going to show them something in the tour that really is at that alignment of their passion and our mission. And then the last piece there is, what is the best context for the meeting? And so that's really important as well. We always say the best place to ask for a gift is in someone's vacation home. So if you want to come to Naples in the winter, we can stop in and have a cup of coffee. I'm sure many of your donors probably spend the winter here. It's a great place to come and visit and sit with someone in their living room and ask them for a gift to support you. But the best context also, just thinking through things like if you're meeting at a Starbucks and there's someone 6 inches away from you, it's not really very comfortable, especially if you're talking about a gift. So ideally you can be in someone's living room. I know because of COVID right now, this makes it a little difficult. We'll talk about some virtual options as well, but thinking through, okay, if you're meeting at a restaurant, can we have a booth in the back? Is the server going to be coming in and out? Can I sit next to the donor if I'm presenting the case? Because you want to hold the case yourself and present it. So can I sit next to them, or do I have to present it across the table from them? Do I have make sure I have the right materials with me? So really thinking through the context, being intentional about where the meeting's happening and the environment around you as you have the meeting. So that's the art form, really important. And then there's also a science behind it as well. What have they given to you in the past? So this is really looking at the numbers and the data. What's their past giving been? What have they given to others? And what's going on in their life? And so understanding, what did they give last year? If you're asking for an annual fund gift, making sure that all of that information that's very clear, and that you're able to present that in the meeting, especially if you're making an ask. What are they given to others? We've had donors before where they were making what seemed like a large gift to one organization, and doing a little bit of research, found out that their name was on buildings at colleges for other organizations. And so a $10,000 gift to this organization seemed like a big gift, but that donor had much, much higher capacity. So through doing a little bit of research, we're able to identify that, hey, this person has significant capacity and they have a spirit of generosity. So we really need to engage them in a deeper way. So doing a little bit of research and understanding what their capacity is and maybe what other gifts they've been making to others, either in your community or elsewhere. And then what's going on in their life at that particular time. I always tell the story of where I had a major donor who was one of our largest donors. And each year he would make a significant a significant gift. But one year I was meeting with him and he said, I don't think we'll be able to give quite as much this year. Both of his daughters were getting married in the same year. And so he had set aside $100,000 each to pay for each of their weddings that year. And so that year he was going to have about $200,000 less of leftover income. And if I would have just forgotten about that and said, oh, he's not going to be able to be involved anymore, not be going to be able to give anymore, that would have been foolish, right? Because the next year you'd have an extra $200,000 free. So understanding what's going on in their life. Do they have 2 kids in college and maybe they're kind of strapped, or things like that are happening, their daughter's getting married, something like that. Understanding that things change over time, right? If they have 2 kids in college now, well, guess what? In a couple of years, those kids are going to graduate. So really kind of understanding those background pieces are really important. Askala?
And step 3 is the preparation for the meeting and the meeting itself. And so we have some things in here that could help you feel more comfortable having a virtual meeting if that's something that your donor prefers to do instead of meet in person at this time. But one of the things that you're going to want to start off with is just refreshing yourself with your last meeting and last conversation with that donor. So you can reread your notes and think of anything that might have happened or anything going on in the future that would allow you to have an authentic conversation with that donor. You want to plan the questions that you're going to ask the donor that leads to deeper involvement. And you also want to have a lot of enthusiasm, be animated, be authentic. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but there's a really neat online tool called FlipSnack that actually allows you to flip through your case for support when you're on an online platform like Zoom. And for the meeting itself, one of the first things that's really important is just to clarify the donor's available time. So if you've scheduled the meeting for an hour, one of the things that you want to be able to do right off the top at the meeting is to say, I'm so glad you were able to meet with me today. Is an hour still good for you? So if the donor says, no, I only have 45 minutes or I only have a half an hour, then you can modify what you wanted to share with the donor based on their available time. You want to remind them of the purpose of the meeting. So again, if this is just a stage of cultivation where you're not asking for a gift, you certainly want to remind them of that. If you are asking a gift, you can follow up with the previous conversation that says, yes, as I told you previously, I'd love to discuss your annual gift for this year. Enjoy the small talk, get to know your donor a little bit better. Obviously, if we're making lifelong partnerships, we want to take an interest in their lives and what's going on in their world as well. And then you want to do a little bit of small talk, but then transition into the point of the meeting. And Zach is going to talk about the ask.
Yeah, so when we are finally ready to get to the stage of actually making an ask, then there are several ways to do that. So if you're presenting the case and using a case for support to make the ask, ideally you have a gift plan in that case as well. And hopefully that's on a page that is just after the budget or the financial need page. And so one of the things that is really important is that you want to, when you get to that page where you've presented the case and you've shown them sort of, hey, this is what it's going to cost for us to get there over the course of the year, or if it's a campaign over the next several years, then you would pause at that point and ask for questions. Before you ask someone for a gift, you need to make sure that all of their objections have been answered. It's really difficult for someone to make a decision about whether or not they want to give if they have these objections in their mind or these questions that just need to be answered. So at that point, just present, hey, here's how much it's going to cost for us to get here over the next year. Let me just answer any questions that you'd have. Once you've answered all the questions, then you can turn the page and show them the gift plan. And you would say something like, here's how we intend to raise these funds over the next year or through the course of this campaign. This is our plan. We're going to need donors at all of these different levels that you can see here. And then ahead of time, ideally, you've already decided how are you going to ask. And so we always say there's 3 ways to ask for a gift. A lot of times we see people kind of do these backwards. And so the 3 different ways are, you can ask for a specific amount. You can leave it open-ended, or you can suggest a gift range or ask for a range. And what we typically see happen is if someone's a new donor and maybe they have really high capacity and we're really excited, like, oh, this person has millions of dollars, I'm sure they're going to give us a huge gift. then we'll just go in and leave it open-ended. But really the thing to do there is when you have a new donor that you don't know well, you want to ask for a specific amount. Ask for something that is a smaller amount maybe than you think they could actually give, but is sort of a entry-level gift to kind of get them in as a giver. And then you have the right to follow up with them and to continue to build that relationship. So a good example of that, we had a client who didn't have a huge budget. She needed to raise about $100,000. And she needed another $25,000 or so to go for the year. And she happened to get a meeting with Tim Tebow. And so she was really excited, like, Tim is great. He has high capacity. I'm sure he's going to, support us well. And so she was going to go in and just kind of, express the whole vision and say, it's going to be $100,000. And Tim is a very generous guy, and he probably would say, oh, that's great. You can, why don't you submit a request to our foundation for support? And that would go in a stack with all the other requests that they get, right? So what we advised her to do was ask for a very small gift. That's something tangible that Tim can easily say yes to. And then you can follow up from that gift to continue cultivating and building a deeper relationship with him. So the suggestion was, in that particular organization, it was about high school students, and they had a camp that they were going to go to. And so they asked for a scholarship for one student to go to camp for $500. And then that's something that's easy for Tim to say yes to. And then she could follow up and send a story about how that student's life was impacted because of his gift, and then build from there a deeper relationship. So that's when you actually want to ask for a specific amount, is when it's a new donor that you don't know well. Ask for something small, that's tangible, that's easy for them to say yes to. The times when you want to leave it open-ended, and I should say too, that's about 10% of the time. Not often that you're going to ask for a specific amount, probably about 10% of the time. Leave it open-ended is another 10% of the time. And that's when you have a donor that's been giving for years, that's super generous, that always just blows you away with their generosity year after year. And so that's someone who has that spirit, and you would still show them the gift plan, and you might even say something like, well, here's where you've been giving in the past, or you've always come in at right around this range. We've been always just blown away by your generosity. And so we'd love for you to consider how you might join us this year again. And then just get out of the way of the giver. That's what we always like to say, just allow them to blow you away with their generosity once again. And then 80% of the time, so almost all the time, more often, 8 out of 10 times, you're going to ask for a range. And the range should be between your target low for that donor and your target high. And so going into the meeting, knowing a range, and you can point to that range on the gift plan, you can circle it with a pen, you can kind of, draw their attention to that. If you're on a Zoom meeting using a tool like FlipSnack, which we'll show you here in a minute, you can draw their attention to that range. And so would you be willing to consider a gift in this range here? And ideally the target low is, if it's an annual gift, what they gave last year. And then the target high maybe is a little bit higher than that. So they have a place where they can see themselves fitting into the overall plan, see how their gift makes a difference for your organization, but also give them a chance to continue to grow and increase their giving to you over time. So 80% of the time, you're going to ask for a range. And then the last piece here is always keep the ball in your court. And that's something that's really important. Like I said before, for us as fundraisers, having these meetings and making these asks is probably one of our top priorities for donors. It can fall down to number, it's kind of low on the priority list. And so it's not that they don't want to make a gift, but if we keep the ball in our court, so make sure that you say something like, would love to give you some time to consider this. Could I follow up with you in a week or two? Could I circle back next week and see if you've had time to consider that? If it's a big gift that you're asking for, maybe they need to meet with their financial advisor, or if it's an estate gift, then you need to meet with a lawyer. So there's a lot of things that need to happen. So if you keep the ball in your court, then you can keep that process moving forward, and that's really important to do as well. So once again, Askala, I'll let you take this one.
Yes, and so as we are going to reiterate again, follow-up is so important. This is how we get lapsed donors and unfulfilled pledges when we don't follow up after an ask. So of course, follow-up is important, obviously after every stage of cultivation, but this one is critical in making sure that your organization is able to move forward with collecting that gift or that pledge. And so one of the things that you could do in terms of just making sure you have a reason to follow up is a lot of times what I like to do when I was a frontline fundraiser is to schedule the next meeting while I was in the current one. So at the end of the meeting, say this is a casual conversation stage, I would say, great, I'm so happy that you loved hearing about our vision and what we're doing right now with our organization. Can I call you in a month so you can come to our organization and do a tour? So that gives you a great reason to follow up with the person just to reconfirm the meeting that's going to take place in a few weeks. So again, this is one of the most critical things that frontline fundraisers can do is to follow up with their donors and to make sure that you get that pledge and that you're able to collect that gift.
So we are in a little bit of a different world right now, obviously. And so here's some tips that you can use for online platforms such as Zoom. A lot of our clients are having great success meeting with their donors over video chat. So whether that's Zoom or Microsoft Teams or even just FaceTime, there's a lot of ways to do that, Google Chats or Google Hangouts. So there's a variety of platforms, but there are some extra tips that you can use if you're doing some of these stages virtually. So the first is if you'd like to use Zoom, if that's your preferred method, and make sure that you confirm that they can participate in a Zoom meeting. If they're not very tech savvy, maybe you use something different, or even just have a phone call. If you're presenting the case, you could always send them the case ahead of time in the mail and say, hey, I would love to walk you through this. Maybe just open it when we get on the phone. If you're doing that via Zoom, it's a lot easier to control that. But some things, if you do have the ability to do a virtual meeting, video chat, whether that's Zoom or something else, then first of all, you want to check your surroundings. Make sure that your background looks nice and that it's appropriate and looks professional. Make sure that there's no distractions. Have good lighting so that they can see your face and your expressions, and that it's easy for them to connect with you as much as possible in a virtual environment. So you can have a ring light in front of your computer, or if you're facing a window, that often helps too. You have a nice natural light coming in and lighting up your face. So make sure you check the lighting and do the best job you can to make it look as good as possible. Check your internet connection. Just follow those little things. Wear appropriate clothes, at least from the waist up, right? And then using a tool like FlipSnack, which I know Askala mentioned before, is a really helpful tool. I'll show you what that looks like here in just a minute. But it's a tool where you can load your case onto FlipSnack. It takes just a few seconds. It's really simple to use. And then when you click through, it kind of looks like a booklet that's opening. And so if you shared your screen and you're walking someone through, it's just a really nice, smooth way to present the case online. And a lot of our clients have had great success with that as well. You can also, what's cool about it too, is you can embed video clips or little messages. So you could, hover over someone's picture and click on it, and a little video testimonial of them could pop up, and they could actually talk to the donor for you, that kind of thing. Or if you have a testimonial of a student or an alumni or something like that, you can embed those right in there. So there's a lot of actually cool things you can do on FlipSnack that you couldn't do in person. And then, of course, use lots of animation with your face and smile, be enthusiastic. I think one of the things I always like to say too, the best fundraisers are great listeners. And the best fundraisers are also just authentic people that care, genuinely care about others and are interested in their lives. And so, just be yourself, be enthusiastic about your mission, let your passion come through. And that's even more important on a virtual meeting like this. And so donors need to see our passion for what we're doing. And that's really important. So be enthusiastic and smile, and use a lot of animation with your face, like we said, or even talking with your hands helps a little bit in these virtual meetings too. So those are a few tips. Hope those are helpful. Here's what FlipSnack looks like. You can see in this first picture here, It's a very simple to use tool. You can upload the document. It takes just a few seconds, and then it puts it in this nice format. And you can click on full screen mode, and it just all that you can see on a Zoom meeting is the booklet itself, and you can just click next, and it flips through the pages really nicely. So it makes a really nice presentation. So if you're presenting the case and the gift plan and making the ask on a tool like FlipSnack, this is what it might look like. And so if I were making the ask of this particular gift plan, I would walk them through the budget here on the left. And then I would pause, like I said before, and answer any questions that they have, make sure all of their objections are satisfied. And then, using the gift plan, you could suggest a range. 80% of the time, you're most likely going to be presenting a range. And so would you be willing to consider a gift in this middle range here over the next 3 years? Or you can actually, with Zoom, you can annotate this. And so you could use the annotate tool and cross off some numbers, or you could bracket in the range and say, we already have we already have 3 of these donors and 5 of these donors and 4 of these gifts confirmed. And so would you be willing to consider, you could circle it or something like that with your pointer. So there's a lot of ways you can do it, but you can draw the attention and say, would you be willing to consider a gift somewhere in this range over the next several years? And then you could, share it or leave this with them afterwards. So that's how we would suggest you use FlipSnack. It works really well. Obviously, you don't have to do that. You could use other things too, but this is a great tool, and it's really cheap. Askala?
Yeah, so whatever meeting platform you use, whether it's in person or online, these are some really important things to remember, especially after your donor commits to a gift. You want to make sure that you follow up as you said you would. So if you told the donor that you're going to follow up in a week or 2 weeks, you want to make sure you go on and calendar that on your calendar. You want to follow up with a note stating the pledge so you can verify and confirm that this is the gift amount and the time span in which the donor said that they would give this gift. You want to make sure you document the pledge and always thank them. So that thank you could be a few times. It could be via email while you're sending the confirmation of the pledge. This could also be a handwritten note from you or your president or your CEO talking about how wonderful it is to be able to partner with this donor. And then also you can just talk about and reiterate what their gift is going to do for your organization in the future. So again, as we work through these steps to cultivate our major donors, we just want to remember that we're treating them as partners, and we want these donors to have lifelong relationships with our organization and be able to see the impact of the mission and the ministry. So again, Zach and I love talking about these things. We're happy to help in whatever way we can if you'd like to contact us after the symposium. And right now, we're just going to turn it over to you to see if you have any questions. Thanks so much.